much for coming out on this beautiful fall afternoon. My name is Sky Harsh. I'm the stewardship coordinator here at the Conservation District. And I have my wonderful friend and partner, Sabrina Huizenga, who is here from the Muskegon Conservation District. She is the invasive species manager at Muskegon, and she's here to talk to us about all things invasive. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, awesome.
So first things first, it's Happy Friday to you. It's Thursday. Thank you for taking the time tonight to come out and learn about different invasives. I want to start off first is that I know a lot about invasives. I don't know everything about invasives. So if you do have any questions, just try to hold those off until the end so I can just get through the presentation. At the end of the presentation, I will have my email address at the very end. So if there's something that you want to ask me and I don't know it, still send it to me because I can look more into it and then help you out. First and foremost, welcome and invasive species workshop. You guys are all here tonight. Tonight, our workshop is funded through MISGP funds, so Michigan Invasive Species Program. The state of Michigan spends billions of dollars on invasive species every single year. And through our West Michigan SISMA, there's 7 counties in our SISMA. I like to call them a family of conservation districts. We have 3 different strike teams out of our West Michigan SISMA that we do treat invasive species. And I'm thankful that I'm in Muskegon County, which we're one of them. So with those funds, I am going to be talking about some invasive species that are not going to be reported yet. Hopefully, cross our fingers, in this county. But if you do see them, we're going to talk about some reporting, what to do, some treatment options, and then maybe if it's too big of a situation that you can't do, there's some resources out there that can help you. Let's see. Do you want to do this or something? So this was formatted in Google Docs, then formatted to Microsoft. So if some things are out of line, that's just because of formatting. So once again, I'm Sabrina Huizenga. I'm the invasive species manager at Muskegon Conservation District. A little bit of my background: I graduated from now known as the University of Iowa, and I have a degree in biology with a concentration in ecology of organisms, and hopefully to get some certificates to figure out where I'm going to do my master's. Been invasive species work for about 4 years now. Before I was here, I actually was with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service with their sea lice control program, treating other forms of invasives instead of flora. So many of you guys probably want to know what how many of you guys, this is your first time here or hearing about a conservation district? So conservation districts are a form of state and federal government entities. So I say a form, we don't really get funds from them, but they still want to claim us, which is kind of unfortunate, but fortunate in a way because it does make us a 503C for nonprofit organization. So it does allow us as conservation districts to apply to grants that maybe for-profit companies can't really apply for. So all conservation districts are different. So there might be something on this board that Muskegon Conservation District does that Oceana Conservation District doesn't do, or they also offer different things than what we can do. Once again, we do and can apply to different grants, and so that allows us to have different programs at different conservation districts. Some of the things that we do is HWA treatments. So many of you guys might know hemlock woolly adelgid attacking 10 to 15 miles of our lakeshore in West Michigan. Invasive species removal, I specialize in that. Fish and wildlife habitat enhancement. We work with like Trout Unlimited, all sorts of, we have lots of partners, Turkey Federation, Pheasants Forever, you name it, we probably talked about it. Stormwater protection, we work with like the city of Muskegon. I don't know if you guys work with any permit agent or anything like that. So just make sure that people are following rules and not dumping things in streams that shouldn't go in streams. Native landscaping, stream bank restoration. So if you live on a river or a creek or a stream and you notice half your bank is slowly deteriorating. Trees and native plant sales. Muskegon Conservation District has one, and so does Oceana. So if you live in Oceana, I highly encourage you to check that out this spring, because there's all sorts of goodies that you can find for the planting of this coming up 2025 year. We have a hunting program. We also have food plot installations, and we have all various different kinds of workshops, volunteer programs, and some dune restoration for our friends that live right off the coast. If you have more questions about that, I'd be happy to answer that. I'm here for invasive species. Some of the upcoming events that we have we have also, of course, pest workshops. So today I'm going to be talking more about our flora, so some of our plant species. But if you're interested to learn more about trees, I don't know if anyone is here to learn about trees pest. I'm sorry, I will not be talking a lot about that today. But we do have a workshop for that if you want to go. We have a buck pole. So our buck pole is going, I don't know if anyone's familiar with buck poles, but we have that's coming up this opening rifle season. We have our macro ID day. If you want to look at some of our water quality indicators, some of our bugs that come from our streets, some future events. So stay tuned if you want to sign up for our newsletter. We have a mushroom workshop. We're going to hopefully have a composting workshop, and then we have our annual meeting. And if you don't want to come to our annual meeting, go to Oceana's. So, I know we're not going to talk about trees, but I had to include this picture. Hemlock adelgid munching on some hemlock trees. So, what is an invasive species we're going to talk about today? Some common invasive plants that you're going to see on the roadside that you're always going to continue to see now after this presentation. That's going to drive you bonkers. Some watch list species, we're going to go over those, which they're kind of supporting everyone to be here for free tonight. Some chemical treatment options, how to properly ID, how to report, and then maybe a little bit of what I kind of go into if you have a serious problem, and then some questions and taking some pictures you might find out. So there is an actual term for invasive species. So it's a non-native organism that has the potential to cause harm to the environment, economy, and also human health. So I wanted to highlight non-native and harm. So if it classifies as non-native and harmful, then it's an invasive species. Something can be non-native and not be an invasive species. So our dogless fir trees are actually not native, but they are not causing harm to our environment or economic or human health. Poison ivy causes human harm, but it's actually native to Michigan. So if anything that you're going to take away from tonight is hopefully this definition of non-native and harmful, either environmentally, economically, or through our human health. Non-native and invasive are always not interchangeable. So we have non-native species and we also have invasive species. So many people might say, hey, that's invasive. It's not here. It doesn't belong here. There are things that can live in our ecosystem that are not invasive. So once again, like that Douglas fir and some of our ornamental plants that many of us have in our gardens. And then hold it before you switch.
Yeah, go.
So this is actually Japanese knotweed growing through foundation right here. And then many of you guys know this Asian carp. So some of the Asian carp that can grow. Did you guess right? So commonly seen invasives that I'm really going to specialize in today is a lot of species that I commonly get calls about. So that's going to be our Oriental Bittersweet, Autumn Olive, and Phragmites. And then when I had made this presentation, the state of Michigan is trying to deter from just discriminate or what's the term for? We're taking away anything that's like ornamental, Japanese, anything like that. Chinese yam is not even called cinnamon. So our Oriental Bittersweet, this is a species that you will see almost like grabbing out to something. Like you can, sometimes when you're driving, it almost looks like it's reaching out for something. So this is a vine and it will vine out and then it will cause many other vines that kind of deter from that main vine. Many of you are probably gonna see it like this in your yard right now, especially with you guys being in the more northern than us in Muskegon County, because a lot of things bloom a lot sooner than we do, right down where we are. This is more of some ID, so if you're familiar with this, the leaf orientation will actually turn to look more round when it gets older, but it actually turns into a teardrop when it first is coming from the ground. It looks like a little teardrop. And then also in your guys' books that you guys are all getting tonight, these two definitions here on the side and these pictures are gonna be in your book for Oriental Bittersweet. So if you're always like, you're gonna take a picture of this, you have it in your book, you'll be able to identify it. You guys are good. So, I had mentioned a little bit of the teardrop. So in the spring, when it's starting to grow, if I just like chop that off like right here, that's gonna be, this isn't the adult. When I chop this off right here, this is almost what it's gonna look like when it starts coming from the ground. It's gonna have those teardrops, and then as it matures, it's gonna start forming more circular. I've seen some Oriental Bittersweet leaves this big. And then they'll be either small or they're bigger. They'll actually come from a vine, and that vine will, over time, will get bigger and bigger. It will lose its leaves, and then it will keep vining up. You'll see it typically in our forest settings or along forest edges. It will get huge if it's not taken care of. So those can get, we've treated some that are this big where I have to go out with a chainsaw. So if you ever see it climbing up on some of your trees, I will say it's a huge issue if you want to start getting it treated. You can always cut that down because it's a lot harder to treat things up in the air, and or if you're going to be using chemical or anything like that, treat it while it's low, cut it down, and then it's going to start sending up shoots. And then those are going to be able easily to spray. Once it's that big of a vine, there is no hand pulling. I'm gonna be honest. We're digging up. Those root systems are super vast. Some of them can go 30 feet either way. So I will say chemical. If you have vines this big, you're gonna have to be looking at maybe possible options. They do have orange roots. So it's an invasive species. It's a non-native vine. It did come from from the other side of the world, China, Japan, and Korea. It was actually introduced in the United States in the 1800s. It was actually commonly as an ornamental plant. So its fruiting stems are cut in the fall and used as decoration. So most of the time the Oriental Bittersweet was actually planted here for either people wanted in their bouquets. So a lot of the time it was used for the florals. So because it's very green and it's very viney, it's easy to work with for florist. And then it has those bright red berries. So when you're done with it, what do people do? They just throw it out in the yard. And a lot of the time in the winter time, because those vines are really easy to work with, they were used for wreaths because I had that bright red berry. So bright red berries, everyone would associate that with Christmas. So that was also thrown in people's yards and or landfills, or yard waste. And then also when people had like chain link fences, somebody wanted, oh, I don't like my neighbor, I want to hurry up and plant something that's fast growing. So that would hurry up and cover or have coverage. So they weren't going to sit next to their neighbor. And then it turns out they had a big issue because it was going everywhere. A lot of birds do like it, so it is here. There is not going to be full eradication of it in Michigan. It's been here for a long time. The only thing that is now is managing it on your property. Like I said, birds do eat it, and they do eat the berries, and that just go throughout their body, and that's how seeds can be reprinted. So just keep an eye on it. If you do have it, you can cut it down. If you have a bigger one, which I'll go more into treatment options later in this presentation. I just want to kind of go into some history. If you do have it on your property, keep an eye on it. If it's smaller, if you want to handle it, you can handle it. But the bigger the vine, the more harder it is to handle. So what it does, if you don't have it and you want to know what it does, is that it will actually wrap around trees because it's trying to outcompete the trees for to photosynthesize. So it's going to keep wrapping around trees. Well, trees are getting bigger and this vine's getting tighter, so it's going to girdle that tree. It's also going to outcompete the tree while it photosynthesizes. And so that tree is going to slowly end up dying, and no one really wants to spend thousands of dollars with living trees if they want to keep the issue. So we've seen it in cases of being completely carpeted. So woodlands, walking into a woodland and it's completely carpeted the entire wood line, and then it's almost like a wall. So it's starting to grow up. It will intertwine with itself and then outcompete with itself to start going up the tree. So yeah, it will cut off the flow of your trees for water nutrients. So it weakens the trees and we'll start to kill off forest, and we'll knock down the forest, and then you'll have a domino effect of maybe a healthy tree off to the side. You have a dead tree that's being taken over by Oriental Bittersweet. That dead tree can actually knock over healthy trees, and then you can lose your entire forest line. We've seen it in lots of Muskegon farms and conservation district. We've seen it too. So Jesse stresses. So if you have this, you have a big problem. So each one of these are a different plant that's going up through. Most of the time, if you have this, you are not looking at chemical, you are looking at herbicide treatments. If you're against herbicide treatments, I don't know what else to do besides try to handhold dig it out. But if you are seeing this is so vast that you're gonna have to start, you'd have to spray that. And then here we actually have cut stump treatments that you can perform and treat. We'll go more into controls. So the control methods, so your little baby seedlings can be handfulled. Someone mentioned that they're orange. So the root systems are orange. You want to make sure if you're handfulling some of the smaller vines that you're handfulling the entire root system. Any piece of the root system that is left, it will grow from. And I like to say that a lot of invasive species are like a little bit like Greek mythology. Cut off one head of the dragon and 3 more grow back. It's very similar. They're very aggressive. They're in an area in a territory that they're thriving in. They have no competitor out competing them. So they're able to thrive and fast produce. But established vines that are connected with that extensive root system cannot be handfulled. Mechanical tilling and mowing, cutting alone will actually stimulate root growth. So kind of like what I said, the root mythology, spreading to have a more vast invasion. So herbicide treatments are combining cutting and an herbicide application can be effective control for Oriental Bittersweet. So performing this would look more like the vines that we've seen. You would cut those low, and you can either backpack spray that, or there's something called a cut stump treatment that you can actually cut that vine at the very as close as you can to the ground. And then you apply, how many of you guys know what a bingo dauber is? Like a bingo dauber? They sell empty bingo daubers that you can actually fill up with chemical. I like using them because you're not having to deal with spray. It's like, so you have more of a concentrated chemical, and then you just dab it on your area that you had just cut. I will say all plants, once you cut them, they kind of want to protect themselves. So those cells are only active for not that long time. I always say 5 to 10 minutes you need to get some chemical on. Because if not, that plant's already trying to protect itself. It's already starting to close in, like the sap will start closing in on itself. So I would be very cautious about timing as well if you're going to be cut. So just don't go cut happy. make sure that you're just doing an area at a time, and working yourself through maybe a larger patch in time with yourself.
Mhm. And you put dye in your daubers, right? So
We
that you
do.
can see what stumps you've
Yep, and
treated.
there's gonna be a picture.
Awesome.
Then you can also take it to bingo.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Really well bingo card.
So autumn olive, this is usually everywhere, on the side of roads. So autumn olive has these bright red berries, and then it also has, almost like a fuzzy kind of leaf. And actually, autumn olive, one way that I can tell is that on the underside, it's almost like silver. Like it is very, very silver, almost like white. It has these white flowers. And I know I mentioned this earlier, but it will have thorns. I know we were talking about thorns, so it will have a lot of thorns on it. A lot of actually female autumn olive plants have thorns. And you can actually, these berries are edible for human consumption. So we'll talk a little bit more at the end of the presentation about foraging. But you can actually eat the berries. It's been here. It's just like Oriental Bittersweet. It's been here for a long time. It's not really going anywhere, but it's down to managing her property. This is also a new book. So it is from Asia. It was introduced once again in this one's in the early 1800s, commonly planted for wildlife food and cover. Many of you guys, I don't know if you're deer hunters, but a lot of deer hunters like autumn olive because deer like to hide them. It produces an abundant amount of berries, if you haven't noticed. So I think 2 weeks ago was when they started dropping them. Birds and mammals do eat it, but not at a rate that it produces. So it can germinate and survive in shade as well as sun. So this is why it's so aggressive. It can grow anywhere, and birds are pooping it out everywhere. Deer's eating it. So it's growing faster than what it can be taken care of that. So we want to encourage people to, take care of it on your property. If you know what autumn olive looks like, you will be driving down the highway and that's all you can see.
Yeah.
It's just fanning if the wind's blowing, it's just like silver. I will say I did bring in this archive. So back then, it was, introduced in the early 1800s. One thing about invasive species is a lot of it's ornamental stuff. So, or was here, either in the early 1900s, people were bringing things over. Ooh, this is really cool. I'm going to bring this over. That's why now the Environmental Protection Agency and there's a lot of rules and regulations that go into with bringing in species from different places. There was a lot of history that goes into autumn olive, and one of them is this archive document here. So before we labeled it as an invasive species, it was actually advertised for selling. So the DNR was advertising it. Actually, this is issued in February of 1951. So this document talks about why it's so great and what it does for the environment. And this is before there was a lot of people thinking about invasive species and what it can do to our natural environment system. So I just wanted to bring this. I won't pass this around if you want to look through that. Pretty interesting. Actually, conservation districts used to sell this in their seedling sale many, many moons ago. And then now we don't, of course, because it's invasive. So that's why there's people like me that want to outreach to people. The state works, like I said, they spend billions of dollars, not just with removal, but with research of different species and why and how they can be invasive to an environment. If they're falling into harm. And go ahead. So what it does is that it can, I know somebody mentioned about are you seeing any sprigs like this once you remove them? So I've cut off one head of the dragon and 3 more grow back. So, they're huge. So they can become a big giant bush. And once that's removed, it can actually send up a lot of shoots. So that's its way of, hey, I'm cut down. I'm going to send out my biological matter to produce more of me. So moving forward, there's native, let me backtrack. There are non-native shrubs, it leaves out early. So when I walk the woods in the early spring, this is one of the very first species that I'm starting to see that's starting to already flower out. So that's not that good when we have native species that need to flower out before these guys. That means that they're out competing some of that sunlight. So anything that needs some sunlight that's around it is actually being out competed already early spring. So it can degrade our native plant communities. So it's been taking over lots of our Michigan native prairie lands. We will see it on the side of our roadways that then will start taking over some of those prairie lands that we see that go further more into some of that Forest Service land. There's also lots of farmers that spend a lot of time on this. That's, it's spread through birds and deer and other vectors. And so when it's growing on the side of roadways and we see a lot of our different agricultural lands, it's actually taking over some farm lands, and it's actually, they're spending thousands of dollars of trying to move it as well. So it actually increases nitrogen and can promote growth, spread of weedy species, and it actually can grow in low nutrient adapted areas. So it can increase stream water nitrates concentrations when it's compromising a large portion of the stream bank vegetation. Once again, this can grow in sun and shady areas. So it's not just on roadways, it's also in woodland areas. We've had to treat a lot of this. This is one of the more aggressive ones. It's here, it's everywhere. Now we just want to help encourage people to find the properties. So some of the control methods for some of those small seeding or seedlings, hand pulling is an effective way to remove that plant. So once again, just like Oriental Bittersweet, you want to make sure that you're getting every single piece of that root system, because if not, it's just going to grow bad. And you want to, the smaller ones, they tend to pull up pretty easy. They don't have as much of a vast root system as our Oriental Bittersweets, but some of those little ones that some of the little shoots that you see, you can handle. You just have to get on them because it will be double the size by the end of the season. So early spring is the time to encourage that. Mechanical, so tilling or mowing, cutting the plant at the main stem at the ground level can kill the root system. However, the resprouts are common. So that's what I had mentioned earlier, is that if you have a big plant, you want to make sure that you cut at the base. And then a lot of those smaller shoots will come up, and then handful of those as soon as you start seeing them come up, because we all want a handful of root system this big and not something that's this big. Herbicide, we like to use a combination of our mechanical and chemical treatments. Usually when we go out and I see a big one, I always still treat it because that will kill that root system before it can even send up those shoots. And that's been very effective for me. Sometimes, you don't get the whole stump of the entire autumn olive. So that will produce a few of those shoots, but handfulling, 5 is better than handfulling. So that's been really helpful. There's lots of different chemicals that can be used for chemically treating this, which is really helpful. It is a woody species. So glyphosate, triclopyr is what I usually tend to use. I don't use much imazimapyr, but glyphosate is going to be more of your aquatic approved species or aquatic approved herbicide, which I always encourage, especially that we're here on the west side of Michigan, our same soils, making them more permeable and a vast amount of our watchlet systems.
Are the herbicides more towards the spring and the stem of the tree?
And so they're foliar applications. So I'll talk about a lot of chemicals towards the end of the presentation, but a lot of what we perform is going to be just foliar applications because it's a little bit easier. And also you can just get, as landowners, you probably don't spend a lot of money on 10 different chemicals. So if you want to go the herbicide route, so we always get like usually one kind of chemical, do a foliar application. It covers 10 different kinds of species. And then there you go. You don't have to spend a lot of money. So I'm trying to get the most bang for your buck.
If you were
if you were using glyphosate for a cut stump treatment of autumn olive, would it be the same concentration as a foliar spray?
It won't.
Okay.
And so when you're using a foliar application, because you have more area to cover, there are things like max application rates that you do not go over. Legally, you cannot go over max application rates, so we tend to have those at like 4 to 5%, depending if you have a more woodier species, which autumn olive and Oriental Bittersweet are. There are more of that woodier species, so you're gonna have that glyphosate. I'm just speaking of glyphosate because it does treat a lot of stuff. That's gonna be more at like a higher concentration because it is treating the woodier species. We usually like a 75%, as in our cut stump is almost pure concentration, because there is still environmental risk, but not as much as what you're saying. You don't want drift, wind tide, as in if I'm doing something that's just right here on the ground for my dauber and I'm daubing it, it's going straight from my dauber straight onto that plant. I can have that at a higher concentration and it goes through the entire root system.
Awesome.
I'll go more into it too.
Awesome.
I just wanted to, I might start breezing through a little more of this. So Phragmites, this can develop in our dense mono cultures. This plant can grow 15 feet tall. And once you have one plant, it like one stem, it can actually be one entire plant. It spreads through rhizomes. There's a picture that will show a little bit more of what that looks like. Has that thick root system in the rhizomes. They all spread through underground. Sometimes if you have a really sandy area, you can see those rhizomes. Each plant produces thousands of seeds. So each one of these seed heads can actually produce 2,000 seeds. Those are either spread by deer, birds that are flying in some of the wetland areas. This is more of a wetland plant, ditch plant, anything that's really wet. You'll see this there. Wind is one of its bigger, wind and spreading through its rhizomes is the biggest ways that it spreads. So we do have native Phragmites, but if you see it, let me know because I want to see it. It is a lot smaller. So our invasive Phragmites can grow 15 feet tall, as our native Phragmites can grow just maybe 8 feet tall. And that's the tallest plant. It will actually just most likely just be a little bit more short. Our native actually is lighter in yellow and the yellowish green in the leaves. A good way that I tend to try to ID these, because sometimes I will go to a smaller patch of Phragmites and I'm like, is this native? Is this native? No, it's not. So some of the indicators is that the invasive have very green stems, as in our native ones actually have more of a purpley stem. The tops look very different. I like to say invasive almost look like a pom, as in our native ones almost just look like a native grass head. Invasive actually doesn't have a fungal spots on it. The fungus doesn't attack our invasive. One thing why it's invasive is because there's not a competitor knocking it out. So one other thing is that these leaves, so our native, just think of purple. And then if I ripped off this leaf, it actually, the invasive one has like these hairs. That's very different. It's very dark.
I feel like I saw that today.
Okay.
Yes, I probably did. So the history and spread, early 1800s, again, it's here. It's not going anywhere. So if you live on a lake, keep your eyes out for this because it can engulf an entire lake. So eutrophication can actually happen a lot faster if this is on your lake. A lot of the small. So it came in the Basque waters of some of the ships when they were transporting, different things from England. The 3 different ways that I had mentioned: seed dispersal, rhizomes, and then there's stolons. So right here is a good different way of how those rhizomes spread. It actually will send it over horizontally and then send up these shoots. So this plant, I will say, is super, super successful with herbicide treatments. Because if I only hit this one plant, it's gonna go throughout the entire vascular system of this plant. it's gonna kill its friend and its neighbor and its brother, its sister. It's just gonna keep going. So it's really helpful to know that we do have, you know, we can fight it a little bit better. We've been able to knock out entire acres of this stuff. It just is a so quick. We're treating a lake actually up here in Oceana County that is completely involved. We actually got all landowners to like, sign their agreement forms and then pay for a toll because we didn't have funds at the time. And we've been able to almost fully eradicate it from this entire lake. So it's really, really nice. Yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's slowly getting there.
Are you using the same chemicals that you use for that?
Yep, I can use glyphosate for all three of those species, which is super helpful, especially if like we're treating, you know, so many different species. Just having one herbicide that I just can specialize in makes it super helpful. And then you can play with more concentrations.
Is it special for water?
Yep.
Or-
So there's different glyphosates, most of the time if you go to buy one, it will say applied and approved on it. I always print that. Anything that's applied and approved. And triclopyr is also, Vaseline is a triclopyr, and that's also applied and approved.
Are you injecting into the plant stem or are you spraying?
No, so we're not injecting, so we're just spraying. So we don't usually do a lot of injections, only with like more tree heavens. You can probably do injections on some of those woodier species, but it takes a lot longer. It's a lot easier if you kind of cut it, you don't see it, and it's doing its job rather than it doing injections. It's gonna take a long time for that to go all the way through.
We had probably a mile and a half of it on Lake Muskegon and the injection worked the best.
For
Right now.
Phragmites, yeah.
Oh, the
We don't-
small needle.
Yeah,
Well, it was a graduate student from MSU.
oh,
Awesome.
interesting.
Couple of them.
That'd
Awesome.
be pretty
We
interesting.
have paid well.
Mhm.
And.
Yeah.
So what it does is that we've said that it can take over an entire lake. Some of you guys have probably, I don't know if any of you guys have seen it like this. If you drive in Indiana, you're gonna see this. If you ever take your boat through the headwater, or not headwaters, but through the crosswaters in Muskegon County, you're gonna see this. So it's tough too, because to try to treat this in super wet areas, requires either a boat, special equipment. You said injecting, so, you know, having injectors to treat in, you know, waist deep water, you know, that can get a little bit challenging. That's one other way why we prefer just doing the foliar application, because I can be either in a canoe and sit there in a canoe and spray this. And it's been super successful. It can threaten our wildlife and some of those habitats. So, our eastern Magasaka rattlesnake actually can have its habitat taken away. It likes a lot of those wetlands. But if it can't thrive in a ecosystem, and these can create monoculture ecosystems, meaning one plant, one ecosystem. So you're not gonna have as much of your habitat and wildlife that's gonna be there. So it can actually take over, you know, some of our diverse wetlands, which our wetlands are in Michigan are also really, really important. We're starting to lose a lot of our wetlands to industrial and urbanized areas. So we try to protect as much as we can. And if we have this guy already not gonna help, you know, knocking out a lot of those wetlands, you know, it makes it a little bit challenging. So keep an eye on this one as well. And one thing a lot of the Forest Service has to deal with is a lot of the fires that it can cause. So sometimes, I don't know if anyone has Phragmites or is on a lake or near this, is that you will naturally see this die off because our water table fluctuates. So if our water table fluctuates, it can either get really swamped out or not have enough water to flow. So it tends to kind of stay within that sweet spot of the water table. So that's why it can just grow all along the entire.
So it won't grow in arid streams, in dry areas.
if it's wet, so like some of the drains and ditches, you'll see it in those areas, anywhere that's like super wet and saturated, it will go in. Control methods, has that extensive root system, hand pulling, will not work. Mechanical methods, will not control Phragmites, but it can knock it down, but it's gonna just promote that to grow faster. Once again, the green technology thing that I mentioned. One thing that we always see and that is helpful is that we've been saying like bag the frag. I didn't have any stickers. I wanted to bring those stickers. But when you see those seed heads, one way that you could also kind of help with some of that seed dispersal is cutting off the seed head and throwing it away and burning it. That's been super helpful.
Not burning it?
Burning, like
Okay.
burning those
Okay.
seed heads or like
Right.
throwing, making sure that you're double bagging those, and then throwing them away. But that's been super helpful, but that doesn't control it. That just keeps it stable and but it will still spread through rhizomes. So one year, if you're too late on like, oh man, it's already started to seed, go cut the seed heads, and then you won't have a million little plants the next year. You're gonna end up having, just what's blooming in there. Herbicide's been really helpful, and I know we're talking.
When's the best time of year for the herbicide?
So best time that we treat Phragmites is when the seed head just starts to emerge and is actually purple. We do not want to treat it when it's any later than that. So right now, we've noticed in Muskegon County, we're done. And then we just finished up Oceana and Phragmite treatments, because the seed head started to open.
Can you do it earlier?
Yeah, you can do it earlier. I will always encourage, try to get the plant, any plant, and if you're gonna do treatment by yourself, any plant that you do, always try to make sure it's mature and before it flowers and seeds. You can get it when it's flowering. It's kind of late, but we still treat things when it's flowering, but when it seeds out, you wanna make sure that you get it before it seeds. You wanna make sure that that plant's fully mature and then it's just about to flower. So that's why we wait for Phragmites, because it's about to flower. Because grasses do flower. So grasses do flower. So right before it starts to flower, you spit out the seeds really much.
Why do you want to wait for it to be mature?
Because those leaves are optimal size. So if I have bigger surface area, that means more chemicals being hit on that plant. And that's more chemical that's going throughout the vascular system of that plant. Now, if you try to treat things that are like early spring, I don't waste your time. Because if I had that Oriental Bittersweet that's this big, and then, but that root system's like 30 feet long, you're not very much. But if that plant's like mature enough, then it's gonna be able to take in that chemical.
Got it.
That's more root system. Yes.
No, I have a question about your, permits are required for areas where standing water present, so if it's on a lake,
On big lakes.
okay,
Bigger than 1 acre. If you go to the DNR in Eagle, Eagle is the one that actually writes out those permits. And they're actually called ANC permits, aquatic nuisance control permits. If you look into that, that's gonna give you more specialized treatments on water. They look more at water treatments than they do terrestrial treatments.
Where's that at?
Eagle, which Environmental Great Lakes and Energy was the old DEQ, and then they changed their name on us in 2019. Because that's not. So other common invasives, I have all of them right here with more information. So in pictures, all of these are in your book for different invasives. And I'm pretty sure that most of the books do talk about maybe some different ways and control methods. And how to take care of them and monitor them and rapid responses. So that's why I wanted everyone to take this book, because like I said, I don't know everything, but this book knows a little bit more than I do. These are some of the pictures. Many of these people, this is purple loosestrife, also grows in ditches, spotted knapweed. This will end up growing in, open fields, prairie, really dry. It actually, the University of Michigan has done studies on this. It is actually a long-term carcinogen, so if you're ever gonna handle it, which you can, make sure that you wear gloves. It actually secretes a toxin into the ground that doesn't allow anything to survive. And then we have some tree of heaven, garlic mustard, some black locust, Japanese knotweed, certain Oriental bittersweet. I can't see it. I think that's honeysuckle. Okay. I have a few read back to you. So some of the things I know that you wanted to talk about this. So cinnamon yam, also known as Chinese yam. So I just wanted to kind of put this out. I don't have or specialize in this species. We don't really have it. Muskegon County has 2 or 3 of reported cases that we're treating. And they're actually on landowners property. So once again, for Muskegon Conservation District and conservation districts, we're 503Cs. That makes us a for-profit organization. We can apply for grant funds. So if we see this, the landowner gets treated. So we are treating this for free for several landowners, but there's also landowners that don't want it treated. They don't want any chemical. And so they actually, you know, it's unfortunate, but it's free. We can at least try to eliminate it as much as we can. It actually has these tubers. Another invasive or native that looks like this is actually our native bindweed. But one indicator is it has our Chinese yam or cinnamon yam. It actually has like a purpley look to it right here is actually purple. And then it actually looks more waxy. It is edible, which is really cool. And so it's probably a theme because it was medicinal business. Black swallow-wort, we actually had treated this in Oceana County. We only had 1 plant. I do want to pass this around. It's a little gross. It's in a bag, don't worry. But these are the seed pods. The seed pods are just like milkweed. And so it will actually disperse through wind very nicely. And so we've been able to treat the 1 location, and then I collected the seed pods. I want to pass this around to kind of give you a better look at the seed pods. We only have 1 reported case of it. Like I said, it's in Oceana County. We performed a hand swipe because it was only 1 plant. We didn't want to get a backpack sprayer out. So what we did is that we were actually able to hold on to that plant leaf and then just coat it with some chemical. We just use the dog. That bingo dauber was able just to cover like just a few of those leaves. That's gonna still do the same effect. Stiltgrass, also known as Japanese stiltgrass. We have no reported cases here on the west side. But here's a little map. I know it's super not the best pixels, but it's the best map that I could find that had any reported cases. If you will keep an eye on this, I'm pretty sure it is also in your book. So if you ever see something kind of weird, and when I say weird, if you see a plant that's weird, and you can almost tell that an invasive species is an invasive species, and if you don't have an eye for it, this book's going to help cure your plant blindness. An area will look completely overtaken. That's one way that you can ID it being an invasive. Also, if there's animal area or animal activity, if everything else is eaten, except for that patch of whatever invasive it is, that's also a good indicator that it's an invasive species. So the herbicide treatments that we kind of mentioned earlier is that someone said injection. We use backpack sprayers. So these are our backpack sprayers that we use. Anyone that has like the 1 gallon pump backpack sprayers, those work perfect too. If you want to start tackling with that, I'm more comfortable with this because I treat larger areas and I can just wear it on my back. I treat all day. But if you're going to be tackling your own property, you don't need to go spend $150. You can just get away with it. Hand pump. We mentioned those bingo daubers. You can use bingo divers and, or you can buy them online. They're called buckthorn blasters. They're really, it's for treating buckthorn. And then also if you go to Family Farm and Home and, don't go in their garden section, go into their farming section. You're gonna find more concentrated chemicals to treat the invasives that you wanna treat, legally. So this one, you can also find, I think at Family Farm and Home, they kind of have something similar to this, and or if you ask their associate of like a dauber chemical, they should be able to help direct you. But most of the stuff that you're gonna find at Family Farm and Home is ready to use, that should be ready to use. You can just take off the package and start using it. We use dye. I don't know if at the areas like Family Farm and Home have dye, but we use turf dye, you know, like to, paint football fields and stuff like that. We just use turf dye. Pond dye, it's very similar. It's not harmful at all. It just helps us know what has been treated and what hasn't been treated. This is an example of a treated stuff of what it would look like.
Like, you follow?
If you, and I don't know because the makeup is different. That's edible. Turf dye is edible, so I don't know if they're organically, it's different. So, kind of mentioned where to find some of the herbicides and pesticides, and I'm only stressing this herbicides and pesticides. I know many people don't like herbicides. And I'm saying herbicides because herbicides treat flora. Pesticides are a general term of all different kinds of pesticides that you can use. I'm only stressing this because if you do have a serious issue, I'm gonna be honest, this might be your only lives. And sometimes treatments can be really, really expensive. So if you want to tackle this by yourself, I just want to make sure that I'm telling you guys this information so that you know how to properly do it and not hurt anybody. So you can find some of these like pesticides at Home Depot, Lowe's, garden sections, Tractor Supply, Family Farm and Home. I always stress to go to Family Farm and Home, you're going to find some more like more concentrated things. So instead of you treating it 3 years in a row, you might only have to treat it once or twice. Now pesticides, you can find all sorts of different pesticides. I know maybe there's insecticides, herbicides, fungicides. Many of that we find are rodicides. Some molluscicides for people who have a garden. But for treatment for some of these invasive flora that I'm talking about, you're going to be wanting to look for herbicides. So any of your weeds. They can vary in strength. So when you buy something, what I buy is I'm a commercial applicator, so I can buy commercially stronger chemicals than general use pesticides that they sell here. But as for landowners, you'll be able to purchase ready to use herbicides and or things that you might need to mix at a different smaller rate. They vary in strength, so your ready in use are going to be more of a lower concentrate. Your ready to use chemicals are going to be more of having to treat, like I said, like 4 years. As in if you find something at like Family Farm and Home, they sell glyphosate, that's 41% that you do. You do need to dilute it. But we'll talk about that. Different in like the general use and the restricted use. I buy restricted use chemicals. You guys are going to buy general use chemicals and this is a commercial applicator. You want to like get some restricted chemicals. Definitely you can contact MDARD and you can become an applicator if you really want to, if you have a serious issue and you're really serious about it. It is an investment. If you want to get the permit and the proper permit.
And where do you purchase those chemicals once you get that certification?
You can look into like Site One. There's different like companies that sell more stronger. You can actually contact that company and they should have a restricted use, higher concentration that you can be able to buy.
And you're saying you purchase online, they send it to you, or is there a place?
We can do that. Yeah, we can do that. You just have to prove that you are, like either, like for us, we're a business and we have a PABL, a pesticide applicator business license. So we either just have to give them our business license or we certain.
Okay.
So different chemicals, we mentioned a few of them. Glyphosate, triclopyr, imazapyr, those are the ones that I commonly use. Any pesticide that, or herbicide that you do use, like I said, I always encourage you to use, aquatic approved, just because we're super close to, Lake Michigan and some of our valuable resources here on the west side. So just make sure that you're using, something that's safe and not harmful to the environment. Nope, there are different trademark names. So there are different chemicals out there that have different names. They're by different companies, but their active ingredient is going to be one. So, in each one of those chemicals, so this is the actual chemical mark brand, they do different things for that plant. Herbicide is one of the ones that I like to use just because it knocks it out of the way and it stimulates that new place, like it will knock it out. Each chemical acts differently. So there are different timings that it will become effective or different timings that you want to treat it at. With the glyphosate, I know you mentioned like when to treat some of like Phragmites, glyphosate I think as well. And I know this sounds crazy, but label is law. The label on each one of these chemicals is going to tell you exactly what to do, when to treat, how much water do I need to put in with my chemical in my backpack spray. It's going to tell you all of that, which is super helpful. What do I need to wear? It's going to tell you all of that. So, just keep that in mind. And then also different species. So, or different chemicals work for different species. So, you want to make sure that you know what species that you're properly identifying. And if it's woodier, or if it's not woody, some of these different chemicals are going to treat different things, which the label will tell you what it treats. So it will have like what, species can be treated underneath the chemical. You can just look that up. And now we have the internet so helpful because if you want to look into a chemical, you can just pull up the label online and do a control find online, and it's going to be able on the label, and it's going to be able to tell you exactly what species can be treated, what mix rates you need to use, and how it treats, when do I treat it, which is super helpful.
Are any of those chemicals listed on that last slide restricted use, or is it percentage based?
Percentage based.
Okay.
So you and I can still both treat with a glyphosate, but mine is how higher
Right.
concentration, yours,
Right.
yeah.
Just wondering about the other ones.
Yes, 2,4-D, I've heard a lot of landowners use for some of woodier species. And it's just different concentrations that you can get.
So one of the key factors for which chemical you choose is what you want to do going afterwards. If you're planning on seeding, if you're planning on
Yeah.
planting, but that's something that's important to look at.
Yeah, so look at your label because sometimes it will tell you, don't plant within 120 days after application. So that's really important. About that. Label is always law. So always look at, some of the restrictions or some of the other different things that the label is telling you, either with planting or spraying. And if you want to spray again, it will tell you can't spray this for 1 year after application. So it will tell you all of that stuff.
And, when you go to the store and, notice that there's, the brand name or, it might say brush be gone, but then there's usually a little box on the
Yep.
front that tells you what the actual.
Yeah, so
is,
there's gonna
and
be
then the
active
percent-
ingredient in her, or inner ingredients.
Right.
Always look at the active ingredient. Every chemical company is not gonna tell you what else is in there, unfortunately,
Sure.
even if you buy bug spray. You can go buy like Deep Woods bug spray. They'll say, this is how much is in here, and then it will say the other ingredients it's not.
In there.
No company's gonna tell you.
Yeah, but at least then
Yeah, but you'll know what.
Because it's not just gonna say glyphosate.
Yep, and then it will tell you the active ingredient, and even if you're at the store and you're like, hey, I see this. And I want to treat, is this gonna be, suitable for Oriental Bittersweet? You can just look, if you got your phone on you, look up that ingredient, look up the label, and then the label will actually tell you what species it will treat. So just always make sure that you have your phone with you, so that you're able to look up, the species if you go to the store or something like that. And, sometimes you just peel them off, you can be able to read the actual bottle itself or container itself. will have one of the, like your chapsticks, if you can peel it.
Mhm.
And you can peel it off and then you'll be able to like see all the label. The label is actually on the container itself, but they just seal it up. So rates and how much you use, I already specified a little bit on this, but label is law. Your label is gonna tell you, hey, if you have these species, it's gonna give you a list of different species. You have these species, you wanna treat at this percentage. You have these species, you wanna treat at this percentage. And then it might say just bittersweet. It's not gonna tell you Oriental bittersweet, but it will treat bittersweet. That's still in the same family. Same thing with, and it will tell you actually how to treat it too. So like foliar applications. Now, I'm not assuming any of you guys are gonna be doing, aerial spraying out of airplane, but there's gonna be a section, in your label for that. So it's kind of, your labels are gonna be like, I don't wanna say mumbo jumbo, but a lot of it's not gonna be necessary and pertain to you. So you just wanna make sure that you're finding the sections that are pertaining to you in your label. So like your PPE, what do I need to properly wear if I'm hand spraying this, or if I'm gonna be dabbing it? So making sure that you're just reading throughout the entire label, and also following what's pertaining to you. So a lot of it's gonna be, small backpack treatments, or backpack or foliar application, small foliar application treatments. So yeah, just make sure that you're always reading the label and that you're applying at the rate that it tells you. So it will tell you exactly the rates, and the exact species, and understand what max application means per property. So it might tell you, hey, you can only put, if I have my jug, if my container saying, hey, you can only put 96 ounces of this pure chemical on your property, that's all you can put. But if you dilute it down, you can spray more gallons. But when it's saying that is like almost if it says 96 ounces, if I just poured this into a measuring cup and then of 96 ounces and I was able to dump it on my 1 acre, that's all I could use for the entire year. So just understanding mix rates. If you're good at algebra, or if you got a friend that's good at algebra, you better be calling them, because it's a lot of algebra and a lot of math when it comes to mix rates. But your label will help you with determining, your constants, which is super helpful. You just need to know the acreage of your crop. Be aware of your surroundings. So we mentioned a little bit about timing. You want to make sure, there's pollinators, weather and season. We're not performing a foliar application in winter, right? Because there's no leaves anything. So pollinators. So if, you got a blueberry field that's near you, make sure that you're not spraying in the middle of June and July, or June and May, when it's starting to flower, because you might be putting the potential risk on some of those pollinators. Your label will tell you if there is an environmental risk as well, if there's a strong environmental risk. With your weather, I know we mentioned a little bit about winter, but you're not treating in the middle of winter. So, and if it's wind gusts, make sure that you're checking, if you're gonna be using a backpack sprayer, make sure that you're checking the winds, because you wanna make sure that you're not 15-mile-per-hour winds and I'm spraying something that's going straight sideways. So you wanna make sure that you're spraying at low wind speeds. Yeah, your season, I know we mentioned a little bit about it, but you wanna make sure that you're spraying at the appropriate season that your label's telling you. Yes. So learning to identify, if you are saying, hey, I have that invasive species, I want to treat it, but is it properly, am I identifying this right? There's different things out there that can help you identify the proper plant that you're looking at. So for one, everyone is taking home a book today. This gives you a lot more information on maybe where you can find some of these species, what they look like, what they, from when they're mature, from when they're little. So there's field guides. This field guide is just this book. So MSU Extension has really helpful tools that you can use. The internet, so we have Missin. Missin's really helpful. It does not only is going to be our reporting area, but it also shows you different facts and how to identify some of these. find different ways to remember a species. If you're like, hey, I know that is this plant and this is invasive. Maybe coming up with your own thing to know and remember that. So that can either be smell, touch, sight, or way it grows or the way it flowers. Make your own name for it if that's gonna help you remember it. So like I know, tree of heaven looks a lot like our sumac, our native sumac. So one way that I'm able to identify it is actually by smell. If I take that plant leaf off and I smell it and it smells like rotting peanut butter, then I know it's tree of heaven. So it's just knowing your different little tips and tricks, like different flowers. They're like, hey, I know this is a native plant, and then I know there's an invasive that looks like it, but this flower is purple and this one's white. So like knowing to differentiate from like some of our natives and invasives and making up little things that as you go, once you identify it, is super helpful. Once you think you know it and you got it, you can actually quiz yourself on different invasive species and not just flora, but that goes for aquatic fish, aquatic plants, forest pests, any invasive species that we have here in Michigan. You can actually go on to Nissan and quiz your own self. Don't worry, they're not gonna like do anything bad, and you're just gonna be told you got it wrong. But if you actually go on there, you can actually quiz yourself on some of the different invasives. And they give you more information on that species as well. If anyone, do you want to take a picture? If anyone wants to take a picture of it, you can take a picture of it.
And I'll be sending this to everyone.
Oh, you are? Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So she'll be sending it all to you, and you can click on the link. So, once you have properly identified it, and you quizzed yourself, and you A+'d it, and you know that that species is what species that you're looking at, and it is invasive, contact your local conservation district. We are part of the SISMA. We report it all. We'll actually treat it. If it's a newfound species, then there is a likelihood that it's going to be taken care of free of charge. There's also missing, if you report it on missing. So I actually, as the invasive species manager of Muskegon County, I have set up alerts through missing that if anyone reports a new species in the area, or in anything that's just new, a new point, I get emails sent to me when there's something new. And just not a new species, you know, Phragmites been here since 1800. So there's a new point that gets sent to me. And then there's something called our watch list here in Michigan. So as you can look through your book, we have various amounts of invasive species here. And many of you guys might be just tackling one or two. Hopefully you don't figure out a third once you look through your book. Be familiar with the watch list. So these are species that aren't here yet. And so we do have our Longford beetle that's actually been just now reported in Oakland County, actually reported by a landowner because they seen it on our watch list. So just be aware of the watch list. This is going to tell you like, hey, be aware, look for this. If you see it, let us know, because then the state of Michigan will go ahead and take care of it. We actually have a few species that are over there on that table. Like hydrilla has not been reported here in the state of Michigan. They actually only had one encounter of it and fully eradicated. So they're all watch list species. Just keep an eye out on, because if you do see it, then it can be taken off of it. Too much to take on yourself. Thankfully, you do have conservation districts. We are here to help you. Like I said, we're not going to be able to fully eradicate it for you, but we can get it down to a manageable status for you to take care of. One thing, we're for nonprofit organizations, so we're here to conserve the land and then help out. So if you ever do need help, we are here to help you. And that just is maybe answering some of the questions that you have while you're treating yourself. And or if you want us to just treat it for you under, you know, low charge, then we'll be able to help you with that through every step of the way. But where you can get you a free site visit if you really wanted to, and then we'd write you up a quote if you really wanted it. We can help you out. But we're not just here to do this. I'm also here to help you out with all of it.
Oh my goodness, my computer's upset. My goodness, sorry for giving anyone a stroke.
I know that is a lot. It was a lot. I know that is a lot to talk about. And I do have some brochures over here, and then if you are in need of like some species, I do have some handouts that's actually underneath this table for different species that kind of lifts out like different ways of control, if you want to start with that. But if you have any questions, you feel free to contact me. This is my email. Like I said, we want to kind of help you every step of the way, and we want to conserve the land to its natural resources. And make sure that you guys, if you are going to be treating, just make sure you're doing it.
Awesome.
Any questions?